This is a Momentum Media production.
The SMSF Advisor Show, your expert insights into the biggest themes shaping the SMSF advice industry.
Hi everyone and welcome to the SMSF Advisor Show. I'm Miranda Brownlee and I'm joined by my co-host Aaron Dunn. Hi Aaron.
Hi Miranda, how are you?
I'm good, and yourself?
Not too bad, thank you. We have had most of our practitioners be working through what's been a very busy period, of course, with sort of final lodgements and so forth. So whether they're practitioners, whether they're auditors, and even advisors going through, sort of tax planning and a whole range of sort of strategy stuff at this time of year with reviews. It is a very busy time of year for the SMSF industry.
Yes, certainly is a busy period at the moment. And there has been a few things happening in the news as well. So we have seen some sort of figures from AFCA in terms of what their sort of key disputes are. And obviously some of those disputes are from a couple of years ago, as it does sort of take time, the process. But they've identified SMSF property disputes as a bit of a systemic issue still. This has sort of been an issue for many, many years, but it is still sort of a big concern for the sector. Around 15% of their SMSF disputes are still related to property, and that's mainly low balance SMSFs being sort of convinced into investing in things like property developments that aren't really viable and things like that, and them ending up with huge debts, for example.
Yeah, so this is an interesting one because we have seen since sort of 2018 or in that sort of 17 through to 19 period, a real shift in focus with the regulators around those one-stop shop property developers and the targeting of SMSF or targeting of utilising SMSF, I should probably say, so getting people to switch across and then a whole range of activity that transpired after their high commissions going into developments, whether they worked or didn't work, and conflicts of interest everywhere. The problem is these things are now rearing their head in more recent times because the evolution of these projects potentially take some time to unfold, whereby the person has lost money, the person has now gone off and maybe sought other advice and they've been made aware of these conflicts. So it's kind of the compound of this that is appearing now as a byproduct of what we've seen in the past. And I've actually had some firsthand exposure to something like this with some people that have been involved and in essence got referred to AFCA and were successful in a claim against a licensee around being put into a project that went belly up and the appropriateness of it. So, yeah, I would like to think, if there's going to be pockets of concern that are in the marketplace today, but the reality I think is that a lot of those items that we've seen go through AFCA are probably more a byproduct of what we've seen in that maybe 14 through to 17, 18 period. And then hopefully the data as we look forward into that would suggest that we'd see something that is a bit more reflective of the marketplace today, where the Council of Financial Regulators changed the lender types. They had a much greater focus on the advice process, and there were a range of other things in the industry where we did see a tightening up of that sort of conflict and the use of SMSS with LRBAs.
Yeah. And another big talking point this year has obviously been this $3 million threshold tax. And unfortunately, it doesn't seem like Treasury is going to budge in terms of the policy design for that, despite a lot of the advocacy work. They're still sort of pushing that it should be the same for APRA-regulated funds and SMSFs, even though some of those issues have been raised by the SMSF sector in terms of it impacting certain types of SMSFs and things like that.
Yeah, so it's an interesting one, isn't it? Because quite clearly there was a period of negotiation or consultation that went on in the lead up to the budget to try and address some of, or at least raise the concerns of industry. And quite clearly that unrealized capital gains tax issue sits front and center with that. And Treasury doesn't seem to be interested, I guess, ultimately in considering this issue further. It's quite staggering that, if we think about the budget, there were two pieces of really policy that were inside that budget. One was around this $3 million balance, and one was around the amendments to the non-arm's length expenditure rules inside the non-arm's length income provisions in section 295/550. And in the $3 million approach, Treasury's really said, we're not interested in setting up different models between the SMSF industry and the APRA industry. Yet we've got the gnarly provisions, and in those very ones, they say, well, what we need to do is we need to set up a different set of rules for SMSFs compared to APRA funds. So it doesn't make any sense at all. There's a part of this process that says, well, if you can work out actual earnings, which in an SMSF we should be able to do, and we don't need to spend any more time or information because that data is readily available within the SMSF annual return, well, then let's use what we actually know, not tapping into the unrealized. And if there is no ability to identify those items, well, then we'd head back to our default model that sits within the consultation process so far. Treasury doesn't appear interested in that. So whether there is any scope, I guess, through the next period of consultation, we'll need to wait and see. And then, of course, the final thing to look at and contemplate would be through, once those bills obviously go into Parliament, and try to influence senators and so forth, which I guess, again, when you think of where the balance of power sits, that may be quite hard to potentially get as well when you have Greens, senators and so forth. So there's going to be clearly strategies within the industry that the SMSF Association and others that feel aggrieved to this process as an industry will look to approach and target. But yeah, Treasury doesn't seem to be the one that we're having any success with at the moment.
We're also seeing sort of the impact of rising interest rates on SMSF loans at the moment. Like a lot of lenders, obviously, SMSFs that have property investment loans for their properties are sort of seeing a big impact on those with those increasing repayments. And we've seen those legacy SMSF products perhaps hit the worst, with some of those paying as high as 10% in some cases.
Yeah, so this is, of course, a byproduct of that Council of Financial Regulators reviews that we saw a few years ago. And I was just talking about a little bit before, because what we've seen is, of course, the majors come out of the SMSF loan space, and we've in essence got a second tier lender in there, and they're getting their money from the banks as well. So there's what we have is some legacy products in the marketplace. And then we have a whole range of current providers that are then obviously impacted via the increase in the changes that we've seen in recent times. So even when, interest rates were sitting at, 2 and 3% for a home loan, interest rates already at that point in time for SMSF loans, because they are linked to investor loans, were in the 5s and even as much as low 6s. So we've seen this, really quick shift to amounts and SMSFs having to pay, in the 8s and 9s and even 10%. And just even note from a related party loans where we have to comply with the safe harbour within the PCG 2016/5, we don't have that figure out for the May 2023 rate, which will apply for 2023-24. But we do know that the April rate is already sitting at 8.6%. So we're going to see loans on a safe harbour, so related party loans that are currently rolling through at 5.35%, potentially head as high as at least 8.6%, potentially higher again, subject to the movements that we've seen. And we did see last month another order of 1%. So from that point of view, most of our loan products in the SMSF space are really going to have an 8 potentially in front of it. There might be some products out there that have a lower rate. I'm already hearing of discussions around saying, well, yeah, I can find the lower rate there, but there's fees that are being picked up on not only sign up, but if you then have reviews and then obviously exit. So you need to look beyond the headline rate and really understand that what are all of the costs that sit within inside the fund, and that you don't end up having to pay, $2,000 to break the loan as part of a refinance just because it sounded like it was going to be good, dropping 1.5%, but you're going to get stung pretty hard on some of the other entry, exit and or other maintenance costs that sit with some of these other providers. So I guess the short answer is do your homework, understand all the costs, but actively be looking at refinancing at this point in time, because there will be some competition in the marketplace if you're paying, interest rates as high as 10% now.
Yeah. And we've also seen the ATO release their quarterly statistics for March, and it has shown that the highest proportion of new SMSFs have actually been established by women in that 35 to 44 year age group, which is actually what we're going to be talking to Joe Hurley about today, the General Manager for Growth at Class. Obviously, we have seen a lot of growth in that 35 to 44 year bracket, and just some of the implications of what that means for how accountants and advisors in this space sort of service their clients.
Yeah, so it's fascinating, isn't it, where we're just seeing this continued evolution of younger members coming in, and this is probably starting to see that flow-on effect from the research that the SMSF Association did to try and debunk a lot of the myths and costs around the self-managed super fund sector. And then when you're looking at general performance of the sector, of the superannuation industry, and people, I guess, turning their attention to what their balance looks like and so forth, that we are seeing this much younger demographic taking an interest in their retirement savings, which can only be seen as a good thing, and therefore seeing what impact that might have on the sector from a long-term perspective. I'm really looking forward to having this conversation with Jo to, I guess, see the view from her side of the fence. Obviously, Class has a large percentage of the SMSF market, and really the trends that they're seeing within their data as well that, back up what the ATO is saying from a statistics point of view as well.
So we're now joined by Joe Hurley, General Manager of Growth at Class. Hi, Joe. Thanks for joining us today.
Well, thanks for having me.
So we're going to be discussing sort of the growth we've seen in younger members setting up SMSFs. We've obviously seen with the ATO statistics, there has been quite a bit of growth in terms of younger members setting up funds. What kind of growth are you seeing in terms of your clients on Class? Are there any sort of statistics that you can share with us?
Yeah, absolutely. So when we did the Class benchmark report a few months back, we were seeing that new SMSF establishments, that there was 40% of new members being under 44. So a strong increase in interest in SMSFs in younger members. 30% of that was millennials, so age 35 to 44. That has been a trend that's been going for the last few years, steadily rising. And we're currently collating the next version of the Class benchmark report, very much in line with what the ATO statistics are saying. We are seeing similar, continued increase. So the ATO stats for the December quarter showed just over 43% of new members in that quarter were under the age of 44. And in that millennial age bracket, 35 to 44, just over 33%, so a third of new members are millennials.
So Joe, what do you think? I was just going to say, why do you think that that's the case? Because I'm really intrigued because, as you were touching on before, the ATO's looking at this, and I guess the three of us kind of fit in this space a little bit, maybe just over. Miranda, you're just under. But it's a really intriguing question because that number is getting younger and younger and younger. I remember when we were first talking about this, when that average statistic dropped to just below 50. But now we're talking about 5 years or more younger, and therefore there is a real wave of interest in self-managed super funds at that segment. We've always talked about the much older demographic and where large balances are and so forth. And there's a lot of conversation about, more than 3 million and the additional tax and stuff. But the key driver to the success of the industry in the future is this person, professional or whoever it may be, that's maybe in their mid-30s, married, maybe dual balances, and have genuine interest in running the direction of their own retirement through a self-managed super fund vehicle. Is that something, I guess, that you're seeing with Class, and therefore the way in which we need to look at the products and in the marketplace and your value proposition as a provider to your client as well? These things become hugely important to understand inside your practice.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So I'd say that in terms of why are people getting into SMSF younger, I think that confirmation of, the 200,000, minimum fund balance for starting a fund, I think that confirmation was really helpful to change the narrative in the market positively towards being able to, or an SMSF potentially being suitable for someone earlier, or for a couple particularly. As well, I think SMSFs are more visible these days. I think even during COVID, we saw, more people online able to do research, and the rise of kind of online providers making SMSF more visible and accessible, faster to establish, and just easier in general to engage with this as a potential choice effectively. And with that comes a lot of responsibility. So, in terms of providers out there in the market, giving access to younger people to get into SMSF and make it easier to roll over their money and get started, I think that we need to think about the responsibility to get information into their hands as quickly as possible at the same time. So what are we doing in terms of bringing education to younger members? How are we supporting them in that initial journey? Personally, I think it's really important that they have visibility over their member balance very quickly, like in very early stages, so that they can see the money going in, that they are thinking about setting up an investment strategy, potentially getting some investment advice early in their journey. And technology, that's a facilitator for that kind of thing. At Class, we have the Class Client View, an app that is designed to, give access to members of new funds so that they can see their member balance quickly, more in real time. And we're very much focused on working with advisors to help make that more popular and something that they recommend to their clients more. So I really think visibility of the actual money sitting in there and ensuring that they have real-time information is very important.
Yep.
You obviously set your fund up at quite an early age, at age 23. What's been your experience, and what's been some of the advantages of starting your fund earlier on?
Yeah, look, I think I'm a massive advocate for setting up an SMSF as early as possible. I actually started mine as a multi-generational fund. So yeah, I was only 23, but I also had my parents in the fund, and they would have been kind of coming up to that early 50s mark. So I really benefited from, the cost effectiveness of us kind of pooling our super in together. Mum and Dad really benefited from having access to professional advice. I've always had an SMSF specialist advisor involved in running my fund. And even though I'm an SMSF specialist myself, I've always found that independence really important in a way, like to help guide me. I'm a time poor working mum who also experiences the challenges that most trustees do as well. So Mum and Dad benefited from the advice that I sought for us as a family, and I certainly benefited from the long runway. So what I see in my experience is the fact that starting so early, I really have every chance to implement every possible strategy that I might hear at every industry event that we kind of go to, because it's following me through all of my life stages, whether that's entering into the workforce, compulsory super. I've bought business real property for my business when I was a sole practitioner and running my own business. And that really enabled me to kind of, both boost my super and also support my business through that journey. My SMSF has been with me through marriage, divorce, really strong investment markets and really scary investment markets. It's something that's kind of traveled with me through all of my life stages. And now in my mid-40s, I'm really so happy that I made that decision in my 20s to start a self-managed super fund, because, now I'm in a position where half of my wealth sits in my self-managed super fund. And that's a really like as a mum of four, and at the stage that I'm in my career, and mum and dad have now retired and left my fund, and I'm the single member in my fund now, it gives me a lot of reassurance. Like it's just something that I like. It kind of grounds me a lot to know that my retirement is sorted, that, you know, that I'm going to be kind of well set up, and that I just have less to worry about. I think as well, you know, why does an SMSF appeal to someone like me, just on a trustee level, ignoring the fact that I'm an SMSF specialist, but from a trustee perspective, I think that in our generation that we do a lot more personal development in terms of the benefits of daily habits and understanding that compounding effect of long-term, you know, small daily habits effectively. So contribution strategies and making the most of every opportunity to boost super is very attractive to me. And I've used a lot of goal setting techniques over the years to up my contributions, salary sacrifice, you know, and use everything that I can to just boost my super on a very regular basis.
Cool. And I think, you know, that sort of habit process is something that, yeah, as advisors, you know, we want to be engaging with our clients about, you know, setting those things. And I think, Joe, you're 100% correct, is that we always talk about long-term approach, and therefore doesn't matter whether it comes to, you know, life goals, retirement goals and so forth. Trying to sort of condense those into 2 or 3 years is never really going to work, is it? So it's that taking that much longer term view into, yes, I'm going to go through the peaks and troughs of my life, and therefore I need to be able to manage those, but ultimately work out and be very clear where my retirement North Star is, to ensure that I get there and manage the risks that come with investment and family life and all those things along the way, to ensure that I get to the outcome that I've kind of set in the initial point in time. So my other question then is, taking us back to the conversation we had earlier with the influx, I guess, of younger trustees coming into the market. And statistically, as we said, we're continuing to see that grow. And I think the reality is as the technology, you know, plays an even greater role in the future, we'll see that age reduce even further. I want to go back and just have a discussion about the professionals, and Martin Frauenfelder, who was a guest on our podcast probably a month or two ago now, Miranda. They go pretty quickly. But we also touched on the SMSF professionals piece, and therefore, what do we need to be thinking about and doing different in the approach of dealing with a younger age demographic when compared to our other clients? I talk about, in our industry, we've really got 2 rails, in my view. You've got this sort of much older demographic. They've been around for a long time. We're not seeing new entrants as much come in this space, but there's a much greater succession, pensions. Yes, we've got to deal with contributions now because it gets us all the way through to 75. But the approach that a younger individual coming in their mid-30s, early 40s, in terms of their technology capability, in terms of their knowledge, is going to be so much different compared to what you might have been talking to clients about 10 years ago. So are there any, I guess, pieces of advice, things that you've been looking at in class around value proposition and so forth that, you know, you can share with our audience today?
Yeah, I think it's really important that professionals are maximizing the tools available, that, you know, when we look at the use of class and, you know, how we're engaging with our users as well, to make sure that they're really implementing best practice, I guess, daily processing, you know, giving access, as I said, to real-time information to their clients, I think is very important. I'd like to see an expansion of tools that help trustees better understand their contribution strategies and the potential of, you know, so looking at that long runway and how do those little changes and those little, you know, extra contributions, I guess, add up over a period of time. So probably similar how you see the retirement, you know, like the pension kind of modeling that says this is how long your money's going to last, to really be doing more in a dynamic sense to model out contribution strategies over a long period of time. And kind of managing expectations. There's a lot of opportunities strategically around catching up contributions, contribution splitting, that you really want to see advisors maximizing for clients. And I'd say as well, also taking into account investment performance. So really regular investment performance reviews. And again, having a look at contribution strategies and how they may need to be adjusted in times where the investment performance has potentially dropped. So understanding the way that contributions and investment performance work together to, effectively, if investment performance is down, it may be a good time to reassess and up those contributions. Yeah, rather than the opposite. Yeah.
I was just going to say one of my big bugbears in the industry is around investment strategies, because there is really two clear schools of thought on it. It's literally, for a large range of the industry for a long time, it's been seen as this compliance document when it's not. The reality is it's there. You're there to set a benchmark to reach retirement goals, and it should be then used as a tool to help actually get there. And in so many instances, for the more arguably the non-advised than the advised client, that's not used as a tool for decision making in the fund. Everything is far more reactionary and not linked to that document. So I concur 100% in respect to that comment.
I think with investment strategies as well, and something like talking about bugbears, one of mine is the whole conversation around diversification in an SMSF. And what we're really working on hard at Hub 24 and Class, is this whole single view of wealth. And that's what we've been missing, I think, in the dialogue for a long time on SMSF, is understanding that the SMSF is one part of, someone's entire portfolio, and diversification across the whole of wealth. Getting that view is really important as well. So we are really working hard to ensure that we deliver on that single view of wealth across an entire client's portfolio, no matter what entity that will sit in, whether that's companies, trusts, SMSFs, that we kind of get this whole holistic view of the investments as well. I think that helps make the investment strategy more, bring it to life, and have the ability to assess whether that's actually a good investment strategy. Looking at it in isolation is always dangerous.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Jo. You've given us some really valuable tips for both professionals and trustees, at sort of either at the start of starting their own fund or thinking about it at the moment. So thank you for all those insights and advice.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me.
Excellent. Thanks, Jo. So, Miranda, what were some of the key takeaways that you got from our conversation with Jo?
Yeah, so I thought it was interesting how she sort of highlighted the importance of younger trustees really wanting that data visibility and that whole view of wealth. But I also thought it was interesting what she mentioned about perhaps having more modelling for a younger trustees, similar to what you do in terms of retirement modelling for older trustees, either approaching retirement or in retirement, in terms of showing them how those contribution strategies will sort of boost their savings over time and how sort of effective those strategies are.
Yeah, and I think that's part of the challenge for us as advisors, where we need to be saying to ourselves, well, identification of the right type of client. We have, and I mentioned it in the conversation, these real different rails of client types in SMSFs. Historically, we saw people in the SMSF industry that are much closer to retirement, and we've got a fairly mature retirement phase market, but we're getting couples and individuals coming into the SMSF market much earlier than ever before. A lot of that's because of the data. A lot of that's because of the different investments. So therefore, the tools that we need, whether that's through software, whether it's through modeling tools and so forth, we're going to need to be able to ensure that our value proposition can actually adapt or be able to service a very different type of demographic. And some people might focus on that more, and some people might obviously just have a different model and approach to some of those clients, because as I think you rightly said, and the data is being supported from whether it's ATO data or class data in the instance with Jo, that there is this cohort of people that are coming in much younger and younger and younger, and they have very different investment philosophies, digital assets and other things as well. So how you as an advisor, how you as a practitioner from a compliance point of view and so forth, be able to service the needs of those become really, really important.
Yes. And just to give everyone a bit of an update on our SMSF Hero fundraiser for Brooke Hepburn-Rogers. We're now more than halfway over the fundraising target, which is great news. So thank you everyone who has registered for that already, and we hope that we get many more registrations in the lead up to that, which is on the 6th of June.
Yeah, that's right. So it's great and a special thank you to everyone that's been hugely supportive of the event. As you said, Miranda, we are well over the halfway mark, both in terms of the tickets sold and the money raised. So a special thank you to everyone there. I'm really looking forward to it. And I know in discussions with Scott and Meg as well, who are also speaking with me, they're very keen to see us hit and or exceed the target. So again, if you want to register, 3 CPD hours for just $110, including GST, you can go to smsfhero.com. So, Miranda, thank you once again. And to our audience, we look forward to you joining us for our next SMSF Advisor Show. Take care and bye for now.
The information featured in this podcast is general in nature and does not take into consideration your financial situation or individual needs and should not be relied upon. Before making any investment, insurance, tax, property or financial planning decision, you should consult a licensed professional who can advise whether your decision is appropriate for you. Guests appearing on this podcast may have a commercial relationship with the companies mentioned.
Are you feeling the strain of high mortgage repayments? Refinancing with Finny Mortgages can help you save big on your home loan and ease the burden on your finances. Our team of expert brokers specialises in helping Australian investors find the best possible rates. Refinance with Finny Mortgages today and start saving. Visit finny.com.au or call us now at 028 866 2444 to chat with an expert.